anything about any previous stuff that needs more stuff? Okay, so now we segue from our good dead friend Thomas Aquinas laying out empirical arguments for God, and we'll head to looking at Descartes, specifically his fifth meditation, 6 of them, his fifth meditation, in which he advances what's called the ontological argument for God's existence. A little background for Descartes. He was born in 1596, died in 1650, and is of course still dead today. His death story kind of interesting. Near the end of his life, he landed what he thought would be a dream job, namely being the professional philosopher for the Queen of Sweden. And he thought, hey, this would be great, philosopher to royalty. But she was one of those people who got up really early. So she wanted her lessons at 5 a.m. And Sweden, as you might know, is a pretty cold place. As Descartes said, a land of ice and bears. And according to the stories, he caught pneumonia and died, which gives 2 important philosophical lessons. 1, don't get up too early. 2, don't live in any place cold or you will die. So some useful advice there. Now, before he died, and possibly after, he wrote many works. These include such things as On the Discourse of the Method. His best known work, of course, is the classic Meditations on First Philosophy, and there are essentially 6 chapters to that, as well as a few other works. So a pretty prolific guy, and then of course he died for getting up too early and being bored. So what was he up to? Well, his motivation philosophically was this. He wanted to find absolute certainty, because he believed that the sciences and philosophy had been built on foundations that are shaky, metaphorically speaking, built on sand. So one of his philosophical objectives was to establish a firm, solid, definitive foundation for the sciences, for knowledge. Now, and during the time period he was Descartes, that was one of the big motivations. So this is an epistemic motivation, trying to find absolute certainty, but their belief was you couldn't do other stuff, like metaphysics, until you had your theory of knowledge put in place. So Descartes is going to attempt to find absolute certainty. So how did that work out? Do we have absolute certainty today? No. So I guess bad on one hand, since we don't have certainty. On the other hand, job security for a lot of people, including philosophers. Now, Descartes, like many people in this time, joined the military to meet interesting people and kill them. It was also a good way to make money. But he also went on, in addition to his outward journey, traveling about, he also went on an inward journey within his mind to seek philosophical truth. So one thing that sort of marks Descartes as perhaps not entirely new, but kind of newish in philosophy, was this idea that you don't have to go to the authority of predecessors, you don't have to go to the authority of religious leaders, you can find the truth within you. Which of course is a lesson of Kung Fu Panda. The secret is within you all the time. Or is it that you can make a lot of money on movies? I'm not sure what's the true lesson. So his objectives was to first find absolute certainty. Secondly, he wanted to create a unified science to answer all questions. Now, those are 2 goals that people are still working on today. Because if you go into sciences and philosophy, people crave certainty, which we can never have. Secondly, the universal science is something they're still working on today. Like folks in physics, they try to create the grand unified theory, the totally unified theory, and the dream in science today is the one theory to rule them all. And we all know how that works out. You try to make one thing to rule everything.
Isn't that what they're doing with the Human Genome Project?
In part. The idea is to understand all of human beings, and that way you can control everything about humans. And the ultimate goal is to have the ultimate science that explains and controls everything. The people in physics think they've got it because everything is made out of matter on their view. Well, yeah, the Human Genome Project, same type of deal. You understand human DNA, and you can control everything. We know where that goes to. Spoiler, it always ends badly. That's how it always ends. Now, thirdly, which is something that's less of interest today, but still pretty important, he wanted to reconcile the view arising during the time period when Descartes was Descarting, was the idea of a mechanical universe. Now, it didn't begin, originally during Descartes' time period. As we saw before, we had people like Democritus who believed that everything is just atoms in the void, clicking together. But the idea of mechanisms. And during this time period, they built fairly clever machines, and you get sort of the first inklings of automation, even suggestions of, even Descartes about how robots and stuff would work. And he sort of anticipates, talking machines. So he runs into this conflict. Namely, on one hand, science tells us it's all mechanical. We're meat bots in a mechanical universe, and that's it. There's no religion, there's no free will, there's no morality. It's just purely mechanical. But on the other hand, do we want to be free? Yeah, we crave freedom. And we want there to be meaning. We want there to be good and evil and all that stuff. And the challenge is, how do you reconcile what all the science tells us, a mechanical, uncaring, deterministic universe in which we're just meat bots, going from birth to death, from what we want? Well, Descartes' solution is, of course, famously, to split the world, Cartesian dualism. You've got, on one hand, the physical world composed of physical substance, and then you've got the mental world, the world of mind and spirit. And Descartes wanted to separate those two. And it kind of worked, So those were his main goals. So how was he going to make this happen? Well, Descartes wrote an entire book on the method. And here's his methodology. He's going to use mathematics. Because if you ask people, what do you like the most in the world? They always say, mathematics. People love math. That's a lot. Now, what he liked about math was this, though. When you do math, like,
solve equation.
Yeah. Do you have doubts about this? Do you say, I got that 2 and 2 together, and I'm kind of sure it's 4, but maybe not. Maybe it's actually, maybe the answer is really squirrel.
It's either right or wrong.
Yeah, it's certain. It's correct or incorrect, and it has that beautiful, beautiful absolute certainty. And so what he thought was, why not just use mathematics for everything? Because it's got that certainty to it, and so you can always be absolutely certain. So if you want certainty, and math is certain, math is a place for it. Now he thought that mathematics involved 2 operations of the mind. One is what he called intuition. Not like intuition, like a gut feeling about like, ooh, I shouldn't trust this person, or oh, this seems like a decent sort of fellow. What he means by intuition is sort of the Platonic, Augustinian sense, where there's this view, which is kind of weird, is that you can just recognize through what he calls natural light, not the beer, although that probably helps quite a bit, but the natural light of reason, where you just simply see its truth. So his claim is that if you're functioning properly, presumably with not a lot of the natural light beer, you can simply examine a self-evident truth, and the truth will show itself. And again, this is not original to Descartes. Plato had the idea that you just had this rational intuition, and you see the truth of the forms. So where do we get these truths that we can just see? Well, to use a badly drawn cartoon, you can think of the Cartesian mind, well, it's a ghosty thing, so incorporeal. And within it, it's stocked with innate ideas. And then you have the light of natural reason, which shines down upon them, illuminating them. Where do these ideas come from? Well, according to Descartes, they come from God. So to use my usual crappy metaphor, think of your mind as like a smartphone, only a ghostly smartphone. Ooh, spooky. And the stuff in there, which you can think of as analogous to like the apps, you know, and content, and God is the creator of the smartphone. So he's like, you know, Apple or Samsung or HTC or
This is in a different realm though, right?
oh, the mind?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the mind isn't, for Descartes, you get a physical body, which is, you know, mechanical, physical shell, and the mind is a incorporeal entity, you know, ghosty stuff.
Okay.
So you get these innate ideas put in by God. Now, we don't always know about them. So you can use kind of a metaphor to like if a spooky one, since it's Halloween approaching. Either like as a spooky, you know, attic or basement, in which there's all kinds of stuff. And you get a flashlight, you're shining it around in there. You know there's stuff in there, but you don't always know what it is. Now, much like all the other rationalists, he believes that you can't get those innate ideas from experience, the necessary truths. And again, it's basically he's accepting standard rationalism. Reason can tell you these truths through this faculty of rational intuition. He's got the innate ideas, in this case put in there by God, and you can't get them from the senses. So sort of the first step is you get built-in ideas, you look in there, you find them, you know they're true.
Oh, so you're saying, he said you can experience the reasons you have?
Oh, it says to know the necessary truths, they don't come to the senses. So to know that 2 + 2 is 4, you can't prove that by going out and looking in the world. It's just something you have to, that's built in.
Reason.
Yeah, you have to reason. Yeah, reason through it. I mean, it's true. True, people would say like, well, don't we like write stuff on boards and look at them? But you know, Plato and Descartes would say, well, yeah, we're just using symbols, but they're standing for the ideas in our minds. Or so he claims. And then some famous empiricists like John Stuart Mill try to reconstruct mathematics purely visually. Spoiler, that did not work. So, but maybe someday we'll do it. Just because it's always failed doesn't mean that it, you know, won't work next time.
When they teach math like in elementary school, it's completely different now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is do you know what that process is called?
I'm not sure. The only thing I know is that all my friends who have kids, they are
Yeah.
constantly bitching on Facebook about how horrible it is. And so I just like, yeah, having those kids was a good choice. But that's a fair thing. It was a good choice, having those kids. It just met the math. Yeah, it's like the dual. Yeah, they revised math quite a bit. So when I was a student, it was like, it was a new thing, and then they just revised it recently. They just keep revising it because I guess they got to do selling books or something. Now, once you get these ideas through, you know, built in innately, and you find them with the flashlight of reason, then you can do stuff with them. So the second function or faculty is, for Descartes, our good friend deduction, in which you, as we saw back in the ancient days of part 1, you apply, if you're using the right type of deduction, valid arguments. You know, use them as premises and valid arguments. And we know that if you've got a valid argument and you put in true premises, you always get what type of conclusion? Well, good reasoning with truth leads you to
Good reason and truth leads you to a true conclusion.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so guaranteed, if you take a valid argument, put in true premises, get a guaranteed true conclusion. So his dream is that you could get to all truths with this method. So everything would be, start with the truth already implanted in there by God, and you would find it again with your flashlight of reason, and then you would take those truths and plug them into deductive logic, and you know deductive logic works because, you know, pure reason, and then you could just, you know, get another conclusion, get a conclusion, that gives you another truth, you plug those truths into arguments, you get another truth, you plug those into arguments, and you keep on truthing until you have all the truths. And he believes in his optimistic moments that you could do that for everything. You could find all the truths through deduction. So if you sat there long enough, thinking hard enough, you could find all truth. Now, this in a way is still a dream. In science fiction, one theme that occurs in, well, many types of stories is the idea if you had a computer that was powerful enough and you gave it enough information, could it deduce everything? Could it predict, from practical terms, could it predict like the future? In super practical terms, could it tell you like the winning numbers of like lotteries, the outcomes of sporting events, etc.? And one view, of course, I mean, we don't have machines that do that perfectly for real. We do have machines that try to do it. Like when we predict weather, kind of we do it. And so Descartes is right. In theory, you could have a way of predicting everything. You could know all the truths. Now, of course, in science fiction, because they usually involve cautionary tales, it usually ends up being disastrous when they build a computer like that. Because usually the twist is often like the first thing it predicts is like the world's going to end in like 2 days. Like, thanks, computer. Now, the reason why he had such faith in this stuff was because of his work in geometry. If you had geometry, you heard you've done Cartesian, coordinate stuff. I guess calling it Descartesian would be too awkward, so just call it Cartesian. And he believed you could take that geometric method and apply it to objects as well. Because he believed, much like Galileo, that physical objects were basically geometry plus matter. And so he believed that you could apply this math to everything.
He's talking about like sacred geometry?
Well, in a way, yeah, because geometry, he thinks rules everything, all the physical world, and it's all mathematical, so it's all deductive. Yeah, so, yeah, it's all geometry, all the physical stuff is geometry. It's math plus matter in motion. Now, his philosophical tour de force, of course, were the Meditations. Its main focus, of course, was on epistemology, namely trying to find certainty. And so the quick version is this. Descartes' first meditation, I don't know anything. I could be being messed with by an evil demon. But I know one thing. I know that I exist. I exist. God must exist. Since God exists, no problem. I know stuff. Problem solved.
Wait, but why must God exist?
Because here's why God must exist. Good segue. So why must God exist? Well, in the fifth meditation, he answers that question. Well, actually, he cranks out lots of proofs of God, but we'll just use, this ontological one.
You meditated 5 times.
Yep, 5, yeah. Well, what he claimed is that he had a vision from God in which he would solve all the problems of philosophy. And he claimed over this series of 6 days, he had 6 dreams, the 6 meditations. Now, the truth is, of course, is that he wrote them over the course of several years, but it's a better story to say, I had 6 visions and I saw the truth there, rather than, I sat down for about a decade, working hard on this book and revising it. As it sounded cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
So what's his proof in the fifth meditation? Well, it's a variation on the ontological argument, first made famous by our good dead friend St. Anselm, and all ontological arguments were basically...
It sounds just like Anselm's
Yeah,
argument.
he stole it and repainted it. Yeah, because what if someone said, smart people borrow, geniuses steal?
It's the most greatest conceivable thing in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally stolen. But he put a new coat of paint on it, so it's okay. Yeah, so basically Anselm's argument. So his proof goes like this. 5 premises and a conclusion. First, so he looks in his mind, and he finds in there that he has an idea of God. His idea of God is that God has all perfections. Crudely put, God is perfect. Now he claims, and this is a critical point, metaphysical point, and that existence is a kind of perfection. Or put another way, existence is a property, just like red or tall or spicy is a property. If the God you're thinking of lacked existence, then he wouldn't be perfect. Because if you have a list of all, to be perfect means you got all the good stuff. And so if existence is a property, an ingredient, and it's not in there, then God would not be perfect. Here's a crappy analogy. Everyone's heard, when they talk about like perfect food, like bananas were perfect for a while, and I think it was like kale. I think Cheetos are truly the perfect food. They have all the essential qualities. They're salty and orange. And so if you had someone claim there's a perfect food, but it was missing an ingredient, you would say, well, that's not a perfect food. It's missing some essential nutrient. And so if God is supposed to be a perfect being, and he's missing, an essential quality, he wouldn't be perfect. if existence is taken as a property, he goes to step 4, hence if I can have the idea of a perfect God, I must conclude that existence is one of his essential properties. So not only does he exist, but he's got to exist. And so if existence is one of God's essential properties, he's got to exist. Therefore God exists.
I have a question with premise number 3. If the God that I'm thinking of lack existence, then he would not be perfect. But how could Descartes say that? Well, how could he say that the God that he's thinking of lacks or does not lack existence if he doesn't truly know himself? If that makes any sense.
Oh, he doesn't know him. That God
Yeah,
exists,
I'm
or-
trying to figure out how he could say that the God I'm thinking of lacked existence. Because what if he thought about the God that he had or whatever in his mind, and that was the God that was in existence? Couldn't that mean that the one that he was thinking about is not correct?
Yeah, it could be mistaken. Yeah, because he's basically saying he's setting up a conditional. If I'm thinking about this God, then, and God is perfect, then he's got to exist. But yeah, but it's fair to say, well, what if you're wrong?
Yeah, because if that conditional isn't true, then, I mean, yeah.
Now, what he would say is, well, he would say, well, the God I'm thinking of does have all these perfections. And he claims, this is where he gets in trouble, because he ends up what's called a Cartesian circle, where you can trust what your idea is because they come from God, and you know God exists because you get the idea of God. So what he would try to say is, well, I have this idea of God that's perfect. So that's our definition. So existence is a perfection. So if God didn't have that, he wouldn't be perfect. But I got this idea of a perfect God. So existence has got to be an essential quality. He's got to have that. So he's got to exist. In a way, it can be seen as kind of a cheat, where he's essentially saying, yeah, I'm thinking of a God that exists. He has to have this property, so he has to exist. He can't not exist. Which is either clever or wrong, but probably wrong. We kind of like to use the metaphor, be like someone saying, like with a triangle. I'm thinking of a triangle. The triangle's got 3 sides. Now, could there be a triangle without 3 sides?
No.
No. So there has to be 3-sided. Now, but of course you could say, as Kant criticizes them, you could accept the triangles have 3 sides, but deny that there are triangles. I mean, that'd be a stupid thing to do, because there actually are triangles, but you could use the example of like a billigon. Billigon, billion-sided figure. We know what that means. Yeah, we're just making that up. It may not be a real thing.
Oh.
But it sounds good. So, we know what that means. So if something is a billigon, it has a billion sides. But does that prove that one exists? No, because in that case we have legitimate doubts. We know what it would mean. If someone said, I have a billigon, in my pocket, someone would say, okay, it's a billion-sided figure, but we don't know if anybody actually made such a thing, because that'd be a lot of sides to put on something. There's a lot of count.
Like, kind of leading off of that, because I'm saying, like, with this type of argument, like, so could I use this argument and say, instead of God, though, I believe in mermaids, or I believe in dragons, or I believe in even ghosts, because it's like...
That's what it sounds like you can do.
Yeah, it's like, if you got an idea of it, then since I have an idea of it, that must mean it exists somewhere.
Yeah, because you just say, I got an idea of it. My idea of the thing includes that it exists. My idea of mermaid is that it's an existing creature that is half human, half fish. So existence is baked in, so it's gotta exist.
Okay, what qualifies as existence then? Does it have to be like a physical trait or like a, yeah?
Oh, yeah, because it doesn't have to be physical, because Descartes believed in incorporeal stuff. So existing would mean, well, for him it would be basically a substance being a substance, because for him there's 2 types, the physical stuff and the mental stuff. So to be would to be an entity.
So it doesn't have to be a physical thing.
No, it could be mental. It could be an incorporeal substance, like a mind.
Okay.
So, to kind of explain what we're talking about, what if everything that we thought of, like you said, not physically created, but in the spiritual realm was created, which is our ideas and how to show existence.
Yeah, there's actually a philosopher, not super famous, but he believed that everything you thought of existed, that exists for real. I mean, of course, it also occurs in like science fiction. South Park had an episode like that, like the imaginary world where everything you think of is real somewhere.
Okay, I got a question, because I'm thinking about a show that I used to watch when I was a kid. There was a character, for example, he used to create like things like out of his mind, and he would say that they're like in his hand, but you couldn't see it. So would that be like similar to Descartes saying that because I thought of it, and it's real in my head, that it's real for existence, that applies to everybody else? Is that what he's saying? Because it sounds as if like he's saying that if this is true, it sounds like he's saying that whatever HD was saying, whatever he comes up with, it could be true.
Yeah, because the way he argues is like one of his other arguments is that if he has an idea in his mind, and if he can cause it himself, it may not be real. He could just be coming out of his imagination and not be real. But if the idea can come from him, has to come from the outside, it has to be real. So Descartes wouldn't say that whatever he thinks of is real. He would say if he thinks of something and he couldn't have created the idea himself, it had to be from outside, so it's got to be.
Yeah, but this is how he says it. I read the meditation. It was saying that he had a clear and distinct idea of a perfect God, but an imperfect being shouldn't have the ability to think of something that's perfect. So it must have came from a being that is perfect outside of himself.
That's God.
And that's God. That's how he words it.
Yeah, that's how he thinks he gets the idea of God. So it's not that he thinks of it and it exists, it's that it exists.
So God timestamps his creations with the idea of himself, so they don't forget that.
And you're saying that Kant said that, well, that still doesn't prove that God is in existence. It just proves that he's kind of here.
Yeah, because Kant, to use a metaphor, if you say triangles have 3 sides, or we'll go with a billion. If I say a billion has 3 sides, a billion sides, we all know what that means. By necessity, a billion-sided figure is a billion sides. But then the question is, does that actually exist? The answer is, I don't know. I mean, you can make one, I guess, if you had a lot of time.
So this doesn't really necessarily prove that God actually exists.
Yeah, that's the criticism, that it doesn't actually work. I mean, Anselm thinks it works, Descartes thinks it works, but, Danilo, didn't think it worked, and Kant doesn't think it works.
And their reasoning?
Oh, well,
They were like, I'm moving.
What's you about to talk about Kant?
oh yeah, okay. We'll see. Well, actually, we'll see.
Sorry, just before we go on, I kind of think this ties in with what you're just saying about the perfect being and imperfect being and stuff like that. I was gonna ask, why do you think that today, like, we have such a God complex, as far as like technology?
Oh, that people think they can just do whatever they want.
Right, cause like you know how like a lot of science, like I feel like people who like go into like study science and all this stuff, and they often come out and say they're atheists or they don't really believe in God like that. They still believe in the universe, so you could do things like law of attraction and stuff like that, but they wouldn't say that that's God. So do you think that? So like they just like the minute like put God down, but they say like you could do all these God-like things, like you can create satellites that can see all over the world. You got phones, you could tap into, you can hear anything you want to hear. So like it's like they try to be like God, now they're trying to create fake humans. They're trying to have babies and like fake, like
Yeah, Nietzsche gave a reason. He said that once we kill God, we have to become God. We have to be once we've done to be worthy of the murder of God, we have to become like God. Roughly. Hey, one reason why scientists typically end up being atheists is the Occam razor argument. You can explain everything without God, therefore you don't need Occam's razor, you don't need God. Now at one point, people like Descartes, who was a scientist, and Newton stuff, did believe in God. So one possibility is people who are atheists will say, well, they believe because it's perfectly rational, because none of the arguments for God work, and all the arguments against, there are so many good arguments against God, you don't need God. People who are more, I guess you could also give a psychological explanation like you gave, people want to think really highly of themselves, they don't want anything above them. Also, you could also say it's a matter of academic facts. For a while, all the cool kids believed in God, and now all the cool kids read Nietzsche, and existentialism and deny God. But of course they would say that it's not being cool, it's that, I know the arguments are all against is God.
Okay, final question. Can you please, okay, I understand Occam's law to the extent that the simplest explanation is probably the more. But, I mean, what's wrong with the longer explanation? I mean, it's most
Yeah.
efficient.
Yeah, it's a good question, because if you take the view that the more economical, metaphysically view is correct, you need a principle as to, why is that true? What is wrong about having like a whole bunch of stuff? Why can't the universe be really complicated? Now, in the case of Occam, his original reasoning was because of God. The God's not gonna, God's does things the best way. So he's not, if he can do it with like one thing, God's not going to make like this, kind of crappy mechanism that requires all kinds of unnecessary parts. I think you can use kind of a metaphor. One possibility is use a metaphor of someone who's very, very good at crafting things. And if they're making something, they're not going to put like a lot of unnecessary junk in there that they don't need, because it's all, because it could break and there's all kinds of problems. They would make it do what it needs to do with the simplest amount of parts. I mean, to use like a metaphor, if you've ever used interfaces for programs, and there's some that are beautifully written, and they're all they get everything done as simply as possible, and there are others that are just insanely complicated. You're just like, that's just horrible. Like most of the academic software is like that.
C++.
Yeah, and so you could say, well, if you take the view that the world is like created by God, he would do things, the simplest way possible.
Right.
Which is why pretty much Occam believed in God, and so that's one of the reasons. Nowadays, you'd have to have a different foundation for it as to why the more economical one is better. Why not have like a whole bunch of stuff? But the claim is if you don't need it, then by economic reasons, metaphysics, by theoretical economy, you don't have it in there. But we should acknowledge that, as you point out, it is based on an assumption that less is better, which is something that could be argued. To uncritically accept that would be a mistake. Because maybe the universe is all kinds of, all kinds of complicated, redundant stuff in it. Now, another interesting feature about God, because a question that was raised earlier, why not apply this to like mermaids and other things? Why not just say like a mermaid is half human, half fish that exists, and just plug existence into everything and prove all kinds of stuff? So what what Descartes has to do is say, this only applies to God, to avoid that exact problem. So he has to run around saying, I'll just put existence on anything and prove all kinds of stuff. So he knew where that was going. So this is how he argues. No other being than God has existence as part of its essence. So it doesn't apply to mermaids or anything else. Aside from God, he claims, we can have an idea of a being without that being actually existing. So he claims if you made a list of ingredients for like mermaid, it would be, top half human, bottom half fish. And that would be your basic mermaid ingredient. Nowhere in there is the requirement that it exists. Just like with a triangle, I'll go with my billigon. Billigon, it's got to have sides, it's got to have a billion of them. Nowhere in there is requiring that it exists. So in the entire universe, there might be no billions, because no one ever made one. Maybe they don't occur naturally, probably don't. But he says when you have the list of God's ingredients, it's got to have existence in there. Again, just like a triangle has to have three sides. He claims in God's list of ingredients, there's got to be existence. And his reasoning is basically, God is supposed to be perfect. Well, part of it is the perfect argument. God's got to be perfect, so he's got to have everything in there. Existence is a property, it's got to be in there. Just like if you have a superfood, if vitamin C is essential, which it is, if you got a true superfood that you could eat and eat nothing else, it's got to have vitamin C in there. It's got to have iron and B12 and carbohydrates and stuff. So if God is perfect, he's got to have all the perfect stuff. Now, another option is to say, well, it's in his list of ingredients. You just, like Descartes says, you just know that. Like if you do, just like if you know someone as a bachelor, you know they're unmarried, because that's part of the definition. If you know that existence is part of God's list of ingredients, by definition, you know God exists. Now, of course, the opposite applies. Well, that seems to be cheating, because you just say, it's like Danilo said to Anselm, you're just like sticking, existence in there. You're just saying it exists because it exists. Now, Kant, as we'll see in a bit, went after that. So we've gone through Aristotle. We've seen the unmoved mover transform from just like a non-God being to God through Aquinas, and we've seen Descartes bring forth an a priori argument for God. So now we transition in metaphysics into the post Kantian phase, looking at Kant primarily because of going after Descartes, but also because of Kant's own contributions. Sorry. So that was well, usually people make a can Kant pun, but I run a higher. I run a higher quality.
You didn't think about that one before?
Actually, I just thought of it, but it works. Now I have it on tape. It'll be on the YouTubes. I assume it'll go viral. I'll get my own television show or something. How would that work?
Probably.
It'll be nice.
I don't know.
Philosophy on the run.
Great idea. I like that. So what was Kant all about? Well, he was born April 22nd in 1724. He was attended the University of Königsberg. He was about 5 feet tall, frail and thin. He was one of those people, well, short is a relative, but yeah, I guess short.
What year was it? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, 1724.
17.
He was one of those people that they knew all kinds of stuff basically from reading. For example, he knew a lot about geography and events of his time, but apparently he never went more than 60 miles from his house. Of course, back then that wasn't such a big deal because no cars and no planes, so not super unusual. He was also known for being extremely orderly. You can go to where he used to live today and find a place called the Philosopher's Walk. And they apparently have a Kant festival as well every year. I assume they have like sausages and beer because, why not? Yep. And he was so orderly, the locals used to set their watches by him because every day he would go on his walk. And one day, apparently, he didn't show up. So they were worried, they ran to his house, and they found him where he got so into reading a book that he forgot to take his walk. But he promised them he would never miss his walk again. Wow. Otherwise they would be worried. He died on February 12, 1804, and is of course still living today. Now he's considered one of the greats of philosophy. People who get paid people who specialize in Kant or have a dissertation on them say he's the best philosopher ever. Kind of the way that people who own huskies say that huskies are the best dogs ever. And the husky thing is true. They are the best dogs. The Kant thing, probably not. He did work in pretty much everything. Metaphysics, logic, aesthetics, theology, math, physics, geography, anthropology. And again, some people claim that he revolutionized philosophy, and they divide philosophy between Kantian and post-Kantian. Other people say, no, but I mean, I guess in a way, technically, you can do that with any person. The world is divided between when they were and when they weren't. Yeah. Or BK, like Louis C.K.
That's amazing. Louis C.K.
Yeah. It stands for Kant. Yeah, that's a lie. Can't Kant. So what was he up to? Well, one of his motivations was against a fellow named Leibniz. Now Leibniz, and we'll talk about Leibniz when we talk about monads and determinism and weird stuff. Leibniz was a rationalist, so he believed all the stuff he knew comes from senses. He believed in innate ideas, basically pretty much like Descartes, only somewhat less famous in German. Now Kant was brought up as a Leibnizian rationalist, and there was a fellow named Christian Wolff, no relation to Wolf Blitzer because his last name. He was a person who was kind of the prime thinker of Leibnizian rationalism. Now, supposedly what impacted Kant was he got the works of David Hume, a Scottish guy we'll look at later on, and he claimed that reading Hume awoke him from his dogmatic slumbers. To which one of my professors said, that way Kant could be dogmatic while he was awake. Which is, I guess, kind of funny. But no, because philosophical humor, they always say don't quit your day job. So he was critical of both the rationalists and the empiricist. And he thought, he was going to create a revolution, and he thought he could kind of work through and take the best of both worlds. So he assumes, first, we do know stuff. So there's a problem in philosophy called skepticism, I don't know, and Kant kind of says, well, we know stuff. Problem kind of solved. Like the rationalists, he believes that knowledge has to be universal, necessary, and certain. But he also accepts the role of perception. So you could say he's building like a consensus or compromise in which there are a priori truths, but there's also a strong role for empiricism. So he agrees with our good dead friend David Hume that one of the big debates in philosophy is, as we saw, was can reason tell you about what's real? Can you sit down and think and know what exists? Descartes said, sure, ontological argument, prove God. Now Hume said, no, you can't do this. Ideas just tell you about other ideas. So for example, you know that Boutross are unmarried, but you don't know if that guy is married. Triangles have 3 sides, but you don't know if, or billygons have a billion sides, but you don't know if they're billygons. And so he agrees with Hume that logic doesn't tell you about what exists. But he wants to keep a priori knowledge. So he's trying to basically do the following stuff. First goal, pretty much the goal of everybody during that time period, roughly about 1500 to like now, which was science is a mess. We need to clarify that. We need to achieve, well, he kind of gave up on the certainty thing. We need to have a clearer foundation. Now, he does agree that experience can give us the necessary knowledge. One thing that Hume is known for is Hume basically says the only thing that's certain is the relation between ideas. You can know triangles have 3 sides, you can know billygons have a billion sides, but that doesn't tell you anything about the world. Like, for example, he says, when Adam looked at water, he could not infer from its translucentness and its wetness that it would kill him if he, went under the water too long, or looking at fire, he could not infer a priori that touching it would burn him. And so Hume says, reason can't tell you about the world. So Hume ends up saying, as we'll see, so you can't know anything about the world with certainty. Everything, we'll see the problem of induction, this problem of causation, so you can't know any of this stuff. So what Kant does, he says, well, he can fix that. You can have your certainty and still accept, the points Hume made. So kind of his view is that in his empiricism, Hume drew the logical conclusion, but he left off, proper fix. So Kant kind of sees himself as fixing up things for Hume. Second task. Much like Descartes, he wanted to resolve the conflict between science and religion, morality and freedom. So we'll be looking at his morality, but we will be looking at science and religion, and also be looking at freedom, because in the next part, one of the things we'll look at is determinism and freedom, how free we can be. And this is something we're still working on today, because science tells us we're not free. But of course we want to be free. Or do. There is, coincidentally, there's a pretty good channel that I guess I'm doing free advertising. There's a called Wisecrack. They do philosophical stuff. Yeah, they do. Also do these notes on famous literature that are good, very accurate. I mean, because sometimes you people are saying crap and they have no idea what they're talking about. But clearly, this person majored in philosophy and did the smart thing. Went on YouTube to make money that way rather than teaching it. But they did the philosophy. What went wrong with the Matrix revolutions, and they were talking about the focus was on exactly this: freedom and choice. Also,
talking about the movie.
Yeah.
Something went wrong with it. Something went wrong. You said went wrong with it. What the guy in Wisecracker, Jared, is doing was he does when movies have great potential and really crap out. He'll do a video called
What's this guy's name again?
Jared. It's Wisecrack. I don't know.
I'm saying.
He's like famous and
What?
Check them out.
yeah, it's good. And he does a lot of the Rick and Morty stuff. And Rick and Morty also has a lot of themes about, freedom. Like the Pickle Rick episode about freedom.
You got his name?
Oh, I just never watched that. Yeah, Gerald, right?
So his concern was that if we have, this mechanical universe, that pretty much does it in for the stuff we really want, namely God, freedom, and immortality. Third goal was most relevant to this class, was to deal with a crisis in metaphysics. Because he believed, this is a problem he faced. Traditional metaphysics involves reason being able to inform us about transcendent reality. We see like Aristotle, Descartes, all the dead folks looked at, believing that reason can take us beyond, the realm of experience. And Kant noted that science made a lot of progress. As it had said, society progresses, and in every war they find a new way to kill you. And he, in his metaphor, he said metaphysics was like a dark ocean without coasts nor without lighthouses. Now, David Hume took the view that metaphysics is crap, so you should just burn all that stuff. Kant, though, said getting rid of metaphysics because some of it's crap would be like refusing to breathe air because there's some air that's toxic, or refusing to eat because there's some food that has gone bad. So what was his mission and objective? Well, he wanted to explain why traditional metaphysics failed, and he believed that he could solve the problem. He could make it possible for metaphysics. And his main work on this was the Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics, in which he tries to fix this stuff. Now, one of Kant's big works, or a couple of big works, were his critique works. It's kind of like his deal. He created, of course, the Critique of Pure Reason, which is about epistemology. And what he did was what is called a Copernican revolution. Copernicus, of course, is famous for saying, hey, the Earth is not the center of the solar system, the sun is. The Earth revolves around the sun. Reverse things. And what Kant was doing was this. It used to be the view that, according to empiricists, that knowledge conforms to the objects. But here's the problem. The classic skeptical problem is you have no way of knowing that what's in here matches what's out there, because you can never get out of here to see what's out there. You can never make the comparison. So what Kant did was he flipped it around. He says, since we can never know that the objects, that our knowledge corresponds to the objects, he flips it. He claims the objects correspond to our knowledge. So you can know about the structure of your mind a priori, by definition, because it's all in your mind, and then you would know about what's real. So you could do metaphysics. But our mind, going back to an earlier point, our mind doesn't create the reality. So it's not like we're living in the world of the imagination. He believes that there is a reality out there, and our mind structures it automatically. We don't even think about it. We automatically structure it, and our experience then is a combination. It's reality plus our concepts, and that's what we experience. Now, as we'll see, we can't really say anything about what reality truly is before our experience is, because as soon as we experience it, we experience it. It's like trying to say, what is the real color of things by what you look at? Well, you can never answer that because it's always what you see. So he believes if the human mind has a structure, and
Sorry to cut you off. So, what, for example, what if he asked you, like, what color is this bag, and he saw that it was black, but you saw that it was red, and you said red? Would he tell you that you're wrong?
Yes, on one hand, because he believes that, kind of as you is, since we have the same structure, it's possible to talk about there being objective quality. So using the color is a good metaphor, because on one hand, color is all in our mind, as we know, because color blindness and stuff, people can see colors are different. But we know if someone sees black as red, they have some sort of optical or cognitive issue. And so that in a way, shows us color is not real, but it is objective. The backpack, on one hand, doesn't have color, but it really is black, because anybody who has normally functioning eyes and cognitive abilities would see it the same way. So next time we'll head more into the fun stuff. So have a good rest of the day and stuff.